Now let us dissect hypermasculinity. To this increasing feminization of man, we get two tendencies. One, as it is exemplified by the MRA, is a sort of dropping out, a capitulation to one's nature, a giving up, a raising of the hands. Some aspects of it take on the passive-aggressive pressure, the playing of the victim, the begging for compassion, so as to attain the goal using the victim strategy. But the most common practice is a sort of exaggerated counter-reaction, because for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. In the case of increased feminization, we get a hyper-masculine counteraction, which is mostly symbolic and not really actual. Now, amongst women, this hyper-masculinity, because this applies to both women and men, as I noted in another video, the masculine, the female, the feminine reside within all psychologies, and the degree that each participates in a particular psychology decides whether this individual is masculine or feminine. So in the case of biological females, this hyper-masculinity manifests itself as a sort of taking on the symbols of masculinity, that is, wearing trousers, putting on the attitude, attaining the positions of institutional power, because, as we said, the only masculine power allowed is the institution, the state, the church, whatever it might be. So women can now become representatives of the institution, because anybody can be a representative of an abstraction, and they can play at being a man, pretend to be a man, where in fact they are not, because to be masculine is an attitude, is a way of looking at the world. Some mistake this exaggerated symbolic feminine reaction to the decline of masculinity as a form of masculinization of women. That is not the case. No matter how women pretend to be men or put on the semblance of being masculine, they still maintain a feminine mind. They defer to authority. They never challenge it. They follow the rules. They never challenge them. They never think outside the box. They never take responsibility for self. They always play the victim, and so on and so forth. So as masculine energy declines, or is pressured into submission, is eradicated, forced into hiding, what happens is there's a gap left over, and this gap is filled in by hypermasculine displays by both women and men. As I said, females begin to think that masculinity is simply symbolic. That is, you wear a gun, you attain a position of institutional power, a status, a social status, and you play at being masculine. Amongst the males, this also has a product, a readily perceived product. We see this most clearly in such displays as bodybuilding or in rap music, where everything is exaggerated, blown out of proportion. In fact, in all cases, we have this hyperbole, inflated muscles, inflated penises. Everything has to be larger than normal in order to compensate, because we're dealing here with compensation for a decline. So as masculinity declines, we have compensation, an overcompensation. If you want to broaden the subject to a more general idea, as sheltering increases and A mind, a brain which has evolved to deal with more stressful, more austere environments, becomes bored and looks for ways to vent its energies. The system provides the brain for such venting mechanism, either through sports or through movies or through whatever other methods of venting. But we get the curious situation where a psychology brought up in a safe environment not only becomes over confident in its safety because it is protected, but it becomes bored. Now everything has to be revved up a bit, has to be raised a notch. Nothing suffices that is below a certain level. Everything has to be louder, everything has to be bigger, everything has to be exuberant, exaggerated, hyperbolic, inflated. So normal sized breasts are no longer adequate. We need huge breasts. A normal sized penis is no longer adequate. We need a huge penis. A normal sized house is no longer adequate. We need a mansion. A normal car is no longer adequate. Everything has to be bigger, brighter, more spectacular, in order to give us the impression that we're being that we feel alive. We see this in amongst people who are what they call adrenaline junkies, because they live in a sheltered, controlled environment where everything is pretty much predictable. They seek out that thrill. We also see that in lesser adrenaline junkies, where they go to amusement parks and ride roller coasters. So they seek that thrill the brain was meant to deal with, that risk, that threat of the wild. But within human environments, this is no longer the case. So the brain looks for that release of energies, that distraction, something to occupy it, to direct its focus. And most people, because they're simple, they cannot direct their focus upon more creative avenues, such as thinking, philosophy, writing, art, all art, music, sculpting, painting, or towards science. So they must be, these energies, simple and shallow as they may be, have to be directed towards something to vent themselves, or else they become dangerous for the system. So amongst males, particularly younger males, if they are not placated using the usual methods of sports, where mock battles are set up, and tribal unities. That's what a team is. A sports team is like a tribe with symbols, with the game being the battlefield, but still with rules, right? Everything still must remain within the systemic control. Nothing exceeds the boundaries of the acceptable. Even when a man gets into the ring to fight, there's a referee there to prevent any real damage. And everybody knows that at the back of their heads. So they can act macho and brave, knowing that there's always somebody there to step in. This is to promote the idea of the risk taker, which particularly in capitalism benefits the system. That is, the less careful a mind is, the better it is for the system, because it keeps capital rolling. It keeps the capital flowing. This is also the reason why in capitalism the psychology of the spontaneous, the spontaneity, is also promoted. The uncaring, the living in the moment with no concern about any future. This is all promoted because it benefits the system. The system doesn't want careful individuals, particularly not when it comes to monetary issues. It needs people that are going to risk, that are going to keep the capital flowing. They're going to keep on working in order to take more and more risk. The gambler becomes a hero because the gambler is beneficial to the system. Of course, most of these people never gamble outside the system. It's always within the controlled environment of the system that all this is permitted. even these displays of hypermasculinity, the big cars, the big mansions, the big jewelry, trying to attract females, the machismo displays in music, in rap music, in rock and roll, are all symptoms of a declining masculinity. These boys now have to put on more and more hyperbolic faces, pretend to be more and more of what they are not, because of this eradication of masculinity. So we get a pretense, and since everything is pretend, then anybody can pretend to be anything they want. So culture declines into a farce, a play, a comedy, a hypocrisy. We might say that what's happening here is what happens in every play, in every pretense. That is the actor trying to imitate what he or she is not, falls into the trap of overacting. So he exaggerates the caricature simply by taking on the outward appearances, the symbols. And because he or she is not actually that which he or she is pretending, it comes across as exactly what it is: ridiculous, exaggerating, pathetic. And whoever has the eye for it can see right through the act. Because to be a man, you either are or you're not. You can't pretend to be it.